The percentage of women that are single it just continues to grow. Women are much more likely to outlive their husbands. Women are more likely now to never get married. And, while we unfortunately live in an age, and we joke about this, where we're not supposed to acknowledge differences between men and women, there are, and I'm sorry, if you deny reality, you are going to get hurt. People will get hurt.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Wealth-Wise Women podcast. My name is Wes Cuprill, and today's episode, I'm going to do things a little bit differently than I have the first few episodes. That's because I am lucky enough to have my first guest today. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Money and Clarity, this guest will not be a stranger to you. But for those of you who know nothing about us or you're a first-time listener, I have with me today Dan Cuprill. He is the man who started it all. In addition to starting Money and Clarity about, I think it's 30 years ago now, he is also my dad. So everything that I know, I've been lucky enough to learn.
I was going to say,
him.
I started you too, right?
Yes, you did about 30 years ago.
I helped in starting you too.
So that being said, Dad, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. I think you're doing a great job with this. And this is a podcast that's much needed. There aren't enough financial advice that's catered specifically to women. So I applaud you for putting this together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. That being said, if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of background about yourself, I know you don't like talking about yourself, but give us a little bit of background and then also talk about the inspiration behind why we shifted the focus of Money and Clarity to working with women.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So like you said, I started the firm about 30 years ago. Actually, I had a partner at the time. We merged our practices. And we've always focused primarily on working with pre-retirees. But over time, what I started to notice was, a lot of our client base was women, even if it didn't start out that way, meaning that if they were married, fine. But, women tend to outlive men. But the motivation to really make a concerted effort to say, as a firm, at least when it comes to our marketing efforts, our messaging, et cetera, is going to be geared towards women, really is a byproduct of my youth. My background was such that my parents both came from very humble beginnings. Both their parents were immigrants. And they knew nothing about money. They got married at a very young age. And they fought about money all the time. As a kid, I remember thinking, boy, wouldn't it be great if everything was free? Because that was always one of the reasons that they argued so much. And ultimately, they divorced. And my mother, who quit high school and married my dad at 17, she always wants to point out, though, that she didn't have my sister till she was almost 20. So that's because when people go, you get married at 17, there's always, right? But this was 1958, right? So, in any event, but she, they had your very, I guess, what you would have called back then traditional setup, often where husband worked, wife did not, stayed home with the kids. She had 2 kids right away, or within the first 5 years of marriage, and she was very ill prepared for what was about to happen when she turned 30. So she did what. Unfortunately, I'm not saying this was her primary motivation, but it was a motivation. She wouldn't lie to you today that, getting remarried was financial security that came with it. And while my stepdad did his best, he was not great with money either. So fortunately for my mom, she had me. And I was able to assist wherever I can. And I'm very honored, as I tell her all the time, to be able to do that. It's a privilege for me to be able to do that. I don't even view it as an obligation. I view it as something you do for love. We're a family. It eats her up. It bugs really, we have these long discussions every week when I'm trying to, explain to her, no, don't worry about this. This is fine. Yes, go get that. And I understand that really, I think our industry has done a really bad job in understanding the differences. in between men and women, and catering our advice as such. The percentage of women that are single it just continues to grow. Women are much more likely to outlive their husbands. Women are more likely now to never get married. And, while we unfortunately live in an age, and we joke about this, where we're not supposed to acknowledge differences between men and women. There are, and I'm sorry, if you deny reality, you are going to get hurt. People will get hurt. And so I felt that I knew my mom wasn't alone. Now, I also knew, based on our client base, that we had a lot of career women. We had a lot of situations where the woman was the primary breadwinner. And yet it just seemed like our industry of services and our messaging was always somewhat paternal, and it was catering more to the needs of men. So when we work with women, we understand that their values are very different than men, and good planning incorporates those values. Women are less concerned really about stuff in their life. They're far more concerned about experience in their life, time with loved ones, being independent, not being a burden. There's a syndrome. I mean, you can find this on Google, called bag lady syndrome. And what it is, it's a much more common thing that the men have, where women have a fear of being financially destitute, or at least to the point where they have to seek assistance, or just to reach what they view as their basic needs they won't be able to get. And men don't tend not to have that attitude as much. Mm-hmm. Well, your planning should reflect the concerns that people have. And if someone has a fear that they could outlive their money, well, which, by the way, is a very valid fear. The days of pension plans for most people are over. Yeah. So if that's the case, well, then the planning that they do needs to take that into consideration. And the strategies that you do needs to take that into consideration. And too often it does not. So seeing that, I thought, you know what, this makes total sense for us as a firm. We have the experience in this area. Yes, we're not women. I get it, obviously. But we've been working with them forever. They're the most important people in our lives. Mm-hmm. And so it was not much of a difficult decision to decide to do it. And boy, what a great reception we've had from the community in going in that direction. So I'm very excited about what we're able to do for women really all over the country, because we have clients all over the U.S.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I definitely want to iterate on this show. No matter where you're listening from, this is we work with everybody from everywhere.
We have over 20 states that are in. So while we do predominate mostly in the Cincinnati area, that's less than 50% of the total client base. So yeah.
So I've in a past episode, I've talked about the unique challenges that women face, and you alluded to it a little bit, though at the same time, grandma's challenges aren't unique to a lot of what women themselves have faced, but comparatively to men, what are some, in your opinion, the unique challenges that women face that men may not necessarily?
The most obvious one is they live longer. Mm-hmm. And because they live longer, their healthcare needs are going to be different too. If you go into your typical nursing home, it is predominantly women, 75, 80%. And that's for a number of reasons. But very often when the man gets sick, guess who takes care of him? The woman.
The wife.
His wife, if they're married, right? Mm-hmm. So she takes care of him. He never goes into nursing home. Then she gets ill. Guess where she's going to go? Into the nursing home. Right? Mm-hmm. So that happens. Now, again, I try really hard not to talk in generalities or stereotypes to say, this is the way you're going to be. No. All right. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there are majorities where that is the reality, right? I mean, again, it may not be politically correct to say women are more likely to go into nursing homes. Statistically, they definitely are. So again, let's not deny the reality. So the first one is going to be that. The second difference, as I was alluding to before, is let's get back to that first one. Because they are going to live longer, their money's got to last longer. So it's a situation where they're going to spend more money simply because of the fact that they're going to live longer. Now, a lot of women will want to spend more money just by nature. All right. I mean, we joke in our family that I live in a very minimalist state. I mean, I really can. All right.
Minus the fly fishing rods, of course.
But they've already been purchased. Right? I mean, just as an aside to fly fishing, when I go into a store, I rarely buy anything anymore because I already have it. Right. But your mom likes to update things a lot. Right. So that would be like me having a rod. And then after 2 years, it's not good anymore. So it really still is good. So in any event, and that's okay. I'm not judging. It's just the reality. Now, I've met many women clients who are as much of a minimalist as I am. All right. Mm-hmm. Not the majority, though. And again, I'm just trying to be candid here. I don't want to, people walk away going, oh, he said, oh, no, I'm not saying.
No, I've addressed from the very beginning. We're not, politically correctness can be bad when it comes to planning for retirement.
Well, just don't deny reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe acknowledge the fact that it's not everybody, but there's a lot of people. And so and look, this isn't research just on what we've observed. It's out there. There's a ton of research out there.
Yeah.
And we've put a lot of that in our book. So it's really more about the fact that their money is going to have to last longer, and therefore they're going to have to be mindful of it. But the other part too is, and this is a really big one, is they're likely to die alone. 80% of women die alone. And when I say alone, I mean they're not married anymore.
Not married.
They don't have a partner anymore. Okay. They hopefully have their children if they have children.
Yeah.
But we've even seen examples, sadly, because of longevity, where people outlive their kids. And that happens too. So we have to be mindful of that. And again, their planning has to take that what ifs into consideration, whereas men tend to, at least from our experience, again, the wife will take care of them. The things that they want to do with their money tends to be a little different too. So there's just these little nuances. Now, again, at the end of the day, we're all people. We all have to feed ourselves. We all have to clothe. We all have to have housing, et cetera. But one of the things I've noticed, and I know you've seen it too, is when we do review meetings, men tend to want to dive into the numbers.
Correct.
Which is fine. And we're prepared to go into the numbers.
Yep.
With women clients, I've always found that the biggest question they always have is, am I going to be okay?
Absolutely.
Am I going to be fine?
Yeah, they're less concerned about the returns or anything like that.
Yeah.
They just want to know, am I in good shape? Yes.
Right.
Okay. So, we don't need to go any further.
Well, yeah. I mean, we want to give them the data to take home.
We do. Absolutely.
If they want to go through it, sure. But they want to be left with a clear understanding that A, they're going to be okay, and why they're going to be okay. More than anything else. I also think that, and the reason why I enjoy working with them so much is a lot of them have the attitude that says, I'm hiring you to make things more simple for me so I can focus on other things in my life.
Yes.
And that's the ideal client for us. That's exactly who we want to be working with. If someone says to me, I'm hiring you because I want you to beat the market every year, don't hire us. We can't do it. Okay. All we can do is put you in a prudent strategy and provide you the discipline to stick with the strategy, which women value a lot. Men are more likely to invoke what I call hindsight bias, where they'll look at, the last month or last 2 months and say, oh, I should have done this. And I'd be like, well, if you got the time machine, let's do it. But 2 months ago, we didn't know what we know. It's like a lottery, oh, I should have picked these numbers. Yeah, right. But you couldn't. You didn't know what they were. So let's not debate that. So those are some of the things. But I think the biggest one is to make sure that the planning and the communication is such where you make it very clear that if they're going to be okay, I mean, we're not going to lie to you. If you're going to make changes, tell you, right?
I can't pull money out of thin air and say,
no. And if you refuse to stick to the plan,
it's not going to work.
We're going to tell you.
Yeah.
All right. If we suggest you spend X dollars a month and you spend X plus Y, we're going to remind you of that. All right. Yeah. I mean, our job is to, hold us all accountable, but really to coach you and to guide you. At the end of the day, the client's the boss. But it's kind of like when you work with a personal trainer. Don't blame the trainer if you're going to consume 4,000 calories a day. Don't blame them that you're not losing weight. Okay. It's not the trainer's fault. The trainer does what they do when you're in that gym. You got to do what you do, and it's the same way that we have the way we work with clients.
Yep. No, makes absolute sense to me. Now, when it comes to healthcare, we just talked about longevity
Mhm.
and how women are most likely to be the ones ending up in the nursing home,
Yeah.
and living longer. What strategies can they employ to be able to account for that, especially given long-term care
Yeah.
continues to increase at an insane rate? I think I saw this year it's $110,000 on average for
Yeah.
a single room in a long-term
Right.
care facility. So what can they do besides just the self-insurance, if you will?
Well, it's a great question because it does show the differences between men and women. Most men that I work with will say, hey, if I got enough money for it, I don't care. I don't need to leave my kids a dime.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they'll say. In fact, a lot of them will even go to measures so that they actually do qualify for Medicaid. And there are strategies that you can do to do it. But women feel differently. Women tend to want to leave a legacy, leave an inheritance to their heirs. So this idea of watching their net worth diminish to almost zero is just not acceptable to a lot of the ones that we work with. Now, having said that, I don't have a problem with anybody self-insuring that exposure, provided it's not going to have a negative impact on anyone. So if you're a married couple and you decide to self-insure that exposure, well, you could leave your heir, your spouse, your significant other,
With
whatever,
nothing.
with nothing, right?
Yeah.
Or a lot less. And then they do not have the retirement that they thought they were going to have. So that has to be factored in. And so maybe some type of long-term care insurance is good. If you do want to self-insure the exposure, the first thing we have to do is A, make sure you can afford it. And then B, there are certain investments or certain, I shouldn't even call them investments, financial products where if you do self-insure the exposure, they will enhance it. So you give them $100,000 and they might give you $150,000 to handle that. All right. But I think the first question always needs to be, if one, is it acceptable to you that all your net worth would go to this and then you would qualify for Medicaid? There are legal strategies you can do. They're complex. Some people will do them where they'll put assets into an irrevocable trust, which in essence gives away their assets.
Yeah, you got to be close to their family, though, if you're going to do that.
You do. So there is a complexity, and you're going to rely, again, on Medicaid to achieve what you need to do.
Which I've heard stories about some of those facilities. Right, they aren't desirable.
You may be 40 miles away from your family. The best advice I can give you is this. One, accept the reality. You're probably going to need some type of custodial care in your life. All right. If you are the average person, or actually higher than average, especially if you're a woman, the odds are very likely you're going to need some type of custodial care.
It's about 2 years on average you'll need it.
Right.
As well.
Now, you may be quote unquote lucky and only need a few months, or you may be like a friend of mine who I played pickleball with last night, whose mother, due to Alzheimer's, has been in a nursing home for 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's still physically strong. I mean, she's in her late 80s, but unfortunately, every time he sees her, she's always asking, where's your dad? And of course, the dad has passed. So very hard, very, very difficult thing to do. But they insured that exposure. And so he was just telling me, how great it is that just gets handled, and he can just, as the trustee of her estate, manage it properly. So the first thing you got to say is that acceptable? Okay. If it's not acceptable, then sure, insuring the exposure might make sense. Having certain type of investment vehicles or savings vehicles that could enhance it could make sense. And I do encourage it to be a family decision, but there is no right or wrong answer here. Just deal with the reality. Please do not say to yourself, it's just not going to happen to me, because you don't know that. Okay. So deal with that reality. It is almost as certain as death. Almost.
And it goes back to, again, why do we insure everything else? We don't want bad things to happen. We just know that they might. And it's important to be prepared.
Well, and look, if it makes sense, I say this to clients all the time when it comes to, say, long-term care insurance. I'll say, look, I know you don't want to pay for it, But does it make sense to spend 1% of your asset base to protect 70% of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you just look at it as a reduction in return? Okay. Instead of earning 8 this year, you earn 7. Why? But 7's good. So that would be another way, to look at it. But don't take the attitude that says, I don't want to pay for something I may never use. Look, the people who use their long-term care policies, they're not winning life's game.
No, they're not.
Right?
They don't want to be using it.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, just like the guy who, buys homeowners insurance, his house burns to the ground. Great that he had homeowner insurance. Ask him, do you wish you never had a fire? Yes, I wish I did.
Yeah.
All my treasures from life, my memories, they're all gone. Pictures of my kids are all gone. No, I wish that I never had the fire. Okay. Same thing here. Buy it. Let's pray you never use it and go from there.
Yeah. No, thank you for diving into that. I think that's great insight for everybody to have. Okay. I want to shift gears a little bit and from the, unique financial issues that women have. Let's talk about what are some of the mistakes that you've seen people make over the years, some of the biggest ones that come to mind and how we can address those.
In all my 30 years, without question, the number one mistake is invoking some level of speculation into your investment strategy. And sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. Mm-hmm. So if you make the mistake of watching financial news on TV. I'll put the word mistake in quotes. Okay, how about that? You're going to see that the entire program, 100% of it, is about predicting the future. All of it. What stock should I own? Should I buy?
And at a deeper level, you'll realize it's just a sales pitch from a hedge fund.
Totally. Financial news exists, for a couple of reasons. Number one, to talk about the future creates interest. Everybody, why do we have all these presidential polls? Because we want to know the answer before the day. We're not willing to just sit back and go, okay, I'll wait till election day in November. No, it's not human nature. And it's the same thing with investments. For many, many years, when I would do workshops, I would tell people, I know exactly where the market's headed. And they'd look up and I go, it's going to go to 25,000. I just don't know when.
Yeah.
And here we are now over 40,000. Now they used to laugh when I would say that because at the time it was maybe around 9, 10. Now,
less than 20 years ago, it was at 8? What was the Dow at in 2008?
600, right?
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yeah.
So yeah. And I explained to them that it's the normal, way that it's going to go. All right. Things double over time. So as I said, look, at that time it was at 10,000. I'm saying, look, if it was 600 when I was born, I don't know how many doublings that is, but isn't it logical to continue to double? Well, it has continued up. But here's the thing. As humans, that little part of our brain, the survival mechanism, which was very, very effective when we lived in caves. Okay. Mm-hmm. What did it do? It motivates you to avoid pain, discomfort, seek warmth, don't be hungry. And if you can, get some pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when it comes to investing, watching your portfolio drop in value for most people, it's painful. And we kind of trick our brain a little bit into believing that if we don't do something about it, it's going to permanently continue to decline. Mm-hmm. That's never been reality. Never. Going in, logically, you should buy low and sell high. You know that. But our brain wants to do the complete opposite. It wants us to go buy something after it's already made all this money because
fear of missing out on it.
Continue. Yeah.
Yep.
And then when it drops in value, we panic and we sell. The complete opposite.
Yeah.
Now, there are investment products that you can buy, many mutual funds that are built on this premise of trying to predict the future. So an investor could be holding onto a mutual fund for many years saying, I've never panicked. The fund manager sure has. I mean, we've seen many times during bear markets, these so-called large U.S. stock funds now go heavy in bonds. Why? What they should be doing is buying more of these stocks at cheaper prices. Now, individuals do it too. I get calls all the time from people. They'll say, before this news event occurs, right now it's the election, should I get out of the market and go to cash? And I'm like, no, why? Everything we already know about the market, it's already factored into the price.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we don't know. So if you go back to, say, 2016, right, everybody thinks, including me, based on polling data, that Hillary's going to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'll never forget. You can Google this guy. Stephen Ratner is his name. Perfect name, by the way, Ratner. Your classic forecaster of market performance. Wrong almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had said that on election night, if Trump wins, the stock market is going to just dive.
Yeah.
He was partly right and very wrong. The next day, there was a sell-off. But on what stocks? The companies that were favorable to Hillary's administration and the things she wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a sell-off on it. Guess what happened there after that? Market went up. All right? There's always going to be winners and losers. So the point here is you can't predict these things. Study after study will show that time in the market is the key to success, not timing the market. Market timing efforts fail.
There was a podcast episode I did a couple of weeks ago where I talked about just missing the 10 best days in the market over the last however many years. It cuts your return in half.
Oh, it is such a valuable study.
Miss 20, it cuts it again in half.
Yeah. There's a company called Dalbar that does a behavioral study every single year where it compares the results investors get versus the markets as a whole, and investors always underperform. The one exception group is usually the ones who work with an advisor. Why? Not because the advisor can see the future. No, because the advisor invokes discipline. So when someone's thinking about selling simply because they think the market's going to go down and they call me, we don't do that. No, we talk about it. We remind them the strategy we had in place that had factored these moments in time in.
Yep.
We talk about how we're going to take advantage of those, how we're going to profit from those. So one of that speculation, that forecasting, the things that investors tend to do, which is without doubt the biggest mistake, is simply because we're human and we're trying to minimize the pain. And so I have often said the key to successful investing is not to look at your portfolio every day. It's not.
I just talked about that in one of the latest episodes. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not saying, please don't say Dan Cuprill says you should be ignorant. I'm not. Okay.
No.
All right. But looking at it every day isn't going to improve it.
Mm-mm.
And
it also goes back to you haven't actually gained or lost anything until you sell it. So at the end of the day, that's just on paper, whatever your account value is.
Exactly. So all that looking at it every day does is it will invoke emotion.
Yeah. And
it's misleading. If it goes up 2% on a Tuesday, there's no guarantee it's going to 2% on Wednesday. In fact, I almost guarantee it won't go up. I guarantee it won't go up the same amount.
Yeah.
So please, minimize, be purposeful in your information gathering, but understand that you're not really going to be making the portfolio better if you're going to look at it. I also recommend that you read your news and don't watch cable TV or cable news or any type of news. Read it. Why?
Yeah.
Because when you watch news, it is all designed to keep you watching. And the way they do that is by repeating the same message. Fear works a lot to do that. And they want you to be emotion driven. Now, Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of real journalism anymore. And I say that having studied journalism in college. That was my major. Everything is now opinion based. But at least if you read the news, you only have to read it once.
Yes.
Whereas if you're going to watch it, every single program is the same.
Exact same thing.
So if an evening at home for you involves sitting there and watching one cable news program after the other, pick up a good book, get a good movie on Netflix.
Your heart will thank you in the long term.
And your portfolio will too.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
So there was a lot of advice in what you just said, but is there any one last piece of advice that you'd offer for any woman who's nearing retirement age?
Yeah, well, I guess it's going to be hard to keep it just to one, but the most obvious one is please, have a strategy that incorporates all aspects of your financial life. So you need to look at this thing holistically. We talk a lot that, we're helping clients primarily in 5 areas. How much do you want to retire on? How should the portfolio be set up to do it? How do we lower your taxes? What insurance do you need and not need? And then how do we work with your attorney so that the estate planning process is quick and cheap? And so the advice I would give you is that you need a strategy that looks at all those areas. And if you don't, you're not planning. You're just kind of hoping. And hope is not a good way to go. Sometimes it works for lottery winners, but for most people, it doesn't.
Their odds are very small, though.
Yeah, understand what those obstacles are. And then once you've got that plan in place, trust me, it's liberating. Now, you got to update it regularly, but it's liberating because there's nothing that we enjoy more than telling people to stop working and retire or to take those trips
Spend your money.
or to visit. Or as we had a conversation yesterday with a client, why don't you just start giving away the money now?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
You don't want to wait. You want to wait till death. Fine. But if you'd like to have an impact now, you can do that now. So that's the key. Don't do it blind. And the other thing too is you may think you have a plan, but a lot of times it's not because it's not really holistic. So often we see plans that are not really plans. They're sales proposals.
No. Yeah.
And, as fee-based advisors, we've always felt that it has to begin with a plan.
It does.
It has to begin with a plan that doesn't require the client implement with us at all. So those are some of the things that, I'd leave you at. But ladies, the future for you is brighter than it's been for any past generation. Now, in 100 years, I could be able to say, if I'm not going to be alive in 100 years, but if I was, I could say that then too, because life improves over time. The quality of life that you lead today dwarfs that of your grandparents and certainly your great-grandparents, if not your own parents. So embrace that, enjoy it. Money, easiest resource on the planet to replace. Time,
not so much.
So please take advantage of that and, have a great future. Take advantage of every day God gives us.
No, thank you very much for that, Dad. And I think for our listeners, they can tell we can go on and on about this. So I doubt this will be the last time you are on the show. And we just have a general conversation about things. But thank you again for joining today. For all of you listening, if you want to get in touch with us and discuss how we might be able to help you put together that holistic strategy, simply go to visitwithmc.com and pick a day on our calendar that works best for you. That being said, I appreciate you all listening, and I look forward to the next episode. Thank you.